Nutrition Club members, your culinary nutritionist Michelle here. On this gloomy Halloween Eve, we're going to prepare a nice warm bowl of pumpkin soup. So the first thing I'm going to do is prep the vegetables that I'm going to use in my soup. The first veggie I'm going to chop for my soup is some celery. I have 4 stalks of celery here. You could use an onion in place of or in addition to the celery. I'm opting for celery because it's less harsh on heartburn or reflux. So I'm going to cut off the ends of my celery stalk. And then because I'm going to puree this soup eventually, I'm going to dice the celery nice and small. So I'm going to go chop down it lengthwise, in half, and then in quarters. And then I'm going to turn it to the side and do a small dice on it. And I'll do the same for every stalk. Prep my fresh ginger using a paring knife. Cut off the knob end, and I'm just going to get myself a good sort of 1-inch hunk, and then I'll use my paring knife to peel off the skin. I've got a pretty good 1-inch piece. I think that'll give me close to a tablespoon of ginger once I chop it very finely. So I'm going to take my big knife now, chop it, until I get some nice tiny pieces. Now I'm going to prep my carrot by first peeling it. And I'm going to cut off the stem end and the bottom. Slide these off to the side. And then since this is a very large wide carrot, I'm going to go in half lengthwise and flip those flat side down so they're easier to work with. And I'm gonna cut them into a bunch of slices lengthwise before I turn this way, and then again, do a nice fine dice. Veggies are chopped. I'm going to heat my oil in my Dutch oven here over medium heat. Then I'm going to stir in my chopped carrots, celery, and ginger. And we'll saute these for a few minutes until they're nice and soft. Now that my veggies have sauteed for a few minutes and they're softened and they're fragrant, I'm going to stir in 2 cups of broth. Today, I'm using some chicken stock that I had in my freezer. but the recipe actually calls for vegetable broth to make this a completely vegan soup. You can use whatever you prefer and whatever you have on hand. Low sodium varieties are always best so that you can control the salt level yourself with the seasoning that you add. So now that my broth is in here, I'm going to stir in my pumpkin puree. And this is the puree that I made last week in our recipe video by roasting pumpkin. You could also use a can of pumpkin puree if that's what you've got on hand, or you can use really a puree from any winter squash, like a butternut squash or an acorn squash. Anything like that would also work very well. And we're just gonna let this simmer for a while. Once I add my salt and pepper here, stir these in to season it up. I'm gonna let this simmer covered for a little bit, and we'll be almost there. Checking on our soup. It's bubbling away here, so I am gonna lower the heat just a little bit so that it doesn't bubble over as it continues to cook. Now that the veggies have softened and the soup has bubbled for about 20 minutes or so, I'm gonna turn off the heat and let it cool quite a bit before we puree it. Now that our soup has cooled some, we're going to ladle it into a food processor and puree it until it's nice and smooth. I'm going to puree half my soup at a time because there's a liquid level line on my food processor, and if I go above that line when I put the lid on and press puree, it'll bubble out right through the top. Nice and smooth.